I used to believe that grief was the heaviest thing a person could carry, but that was before my mother sued me for $6,800,000. Standing in the cold silence of the probate court, watching her lawyer paint my love for my grandmother as manipulation, I realized the money was just ammunition. We were not fighting over an inheritance anymore. We were fighting over which one of us was the monster. The rain in Harbor did not wash things clean. It just made the grime stick harder to the pavement. I stood by the window of my grandmother's townhouse, watching the gray water hammer against the glass. It had been 4 days since Maggie died, and the silence inside the house was heavy enough to bruise. I had spent the last 48 hours moving through the numb logistics of death. A checklist that felt perverse in its practicality. I had selected a casket made of maple because she liked the color of the leaves in October. I had ordered flowers, specifically avoiding lilies because she said they smelled like funerals, which was a joke she found funny and I found heartbreaking. I had answered 312 condolence texts, mostly with the same copy and paste response thanking people for their thoughts and prayers. Now, the house was just a collection of objects that had lost their owner: the ceramic rooster on the counter, the stack of crossword puzzles on the coffee table, the smell of lavender and old paper that permeated the curtains. I felt like an intruder in the only place that had ever really felt like home. My mother, Vivian, was late. We were meeting at the office of Maggie's estate attorney, a man named Arthur Sterling who had handled the family's affairs since before I was born. Vivian had texted me twice to say traffic was terrible, which was code for she was fixing her makeup and composing herself. Vivian did not do grief messily. She treated it like a formal event, something to be dressed for. When I finally arrived at Sterling's office, the leather chairs were cold. Vivian was already there, sitting with her back perfectly straight, wearing a black dress that cost more than my first car. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Eleanor," she said, "you look tired." "I am tired," I said. I sat down in the chair opposite her. The mahogany desk between us felt like a barricade. Arthur Sterling entered a moment later. He was a man who looked like he was made of parchment paper and patience. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and opened a thick folder. There was no preamble. He knew us too well for that. "I will get right to the point," Arthur said. "Margaret made significant changes to her estate plan 8 months ago." I felt the air in the room shift. Vivian uncrossed her legs and crossed them the other way. "Changes?" Vivian asked. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the air conditioner. Mother did not mention changes. Arthur did not look up from the document. He began to read. The legal language was dry, but the numbers were staggering. The total value of the estate, including the townhouse, the investment portfolio, and the life insurance, was $6,800,000. I blinked. I knew Maggie was comfortable. I did not know she was wealthy. Arthur continued. "To my daughter, Vivian Hale Watson, I leave the sum of $250,000. Vivian let out a small, strangled sound. "250,000? Arthur raised a hand. "And specific donations of $50,000 each to the Harbor Public Library and the Harbor Animal Shelter. The remainder of the estate, including the real estate and the residual trust, is to be held for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Eleanor Watson." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical thing, sucking the oxygen out of the room. I sat frozen, the words not quite registering. $6 million. "To me, it is a mistake," Vivian said. Her voice was very quiet. "It is not a mistake," Arthur said gently. "I drafted the documents myself." "Vivian." Maggie was very clear. Vivian stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. She turned to look at me, and the expression on her face was not one of a grieving mother. It was the face of a stranger who had just realized she had been robbed. "You," Vivian said. I stared at her. "Mom, I did not know." "Don't lie to me," she hissed. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "You were over there every day for the last 6 months. You were driving her to the doctors. You were handling her mail. You got to her. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was helping her. I said, she was sick. She needed help. You were poisoning her against me, Vivian said. Her voice rose, cracking with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You took advantage of a confused old woman. You manipulated her into cutting out her own daughter. Vivian, Arthur said, his voice firm. Margaret was not confused. She was sound of mind. We have the competency evaluation from the day she signed. Vivian spun on him. Competency? She was 82 years old. She forgot where she put her glasses. And this, she gestured wildly at me, this opportunistic little snake was whispering in her ear the whole time. I stood up, my hands shaking. That is not true. I never asked her for a dime. I never even knew she had this kind of money. Vivian laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. Oh, please, you are a marketing director. Eleanor, you sell things for a living. You sold her a story about how much you loved her. And she bought it. I walked out. I could not stay in that room for another second. I heard Arthur calling my name, and I heard Vivian screaming something about a travesty. But I just kept walking. I walked out of the building, into the rain, and got into my car. I sat there for 20 minutes, shivering, staring at the steering wheel, waiting for the world to stop spinning. The guilt hit me before the engine started. I had spent the last 6 months with Maggie. I had driven her to her oncology appointments. I had sat with her while she got infusions. I had organized her bills because her eyesight was failing and the numbers confused her. I had cooked her dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays because she was too tired to stand at the stove. I did it because I loved her. She was the only person who had ever seen me, really seen me, without wanting me to be something else. But as I sat in the rain, I replayed those months through Vivian's eyes. I saw myself intercepting phone calls. I saw myself managing the checkbook. I saw myself sitting close to Maggie on the sofa, talking in low voices, to an outsider, to a court, to a furious mother. Did it look like love? Or did it look like a long con? I drove home, feeling sick. By the middle of the next week, the private tragedy had become public property. I worked at a mid-sized firm in downtown Harbor It was the kind of place where everyone knew what everyone else brought for lunch. When I walked in on Wednesday morning, the conversation in the break room died instantly. 3 of my colleagues were huddled by the coffee machine. They turned to look at me, then looked away, suddenly fascinated by their mugs. Morning, I said. My voice sounded thin. Morning. Eleanor, one of them said. She did not smile. I went to my desk and opened my computer. I had a Google alert set up for my name, mostly for professional reasons. There was a new notification. It was a link to the Harbor Brook Scoop, a local blog that masqueraded as news but was mostly malicious gossip. The headline made my stomach drop. Granddaughter takes it all. Local heiress. Cut out of millions in shocking deathbed twist. I clicked on it against my better judgment. The article was anonymous, but the details were terrifyingly specific. It mentioned the dollar amount. It mentioned the specific donations to the library. It painted a picture of a devoted daughter, Vivian, pushed aside by a younger, greedier relative who had swooped in during the final months. There was a photo of me, taken from my LinkedIn profile, next to a photo of Maggie. The caption read, Eleanor Watson, 33, sole beneficiary of the Hale fortune. I closed the laptop. I felt like everyone in the office was looking at the back of my head. I went to the grocery store that evening to buy milk and bread, simply to prove to myself that I could still do normal things. I was standing in the dairy aisle when I saw Mrs. Gable, a woman who had lived down the street from us when I was a child. She was holding a carton of eggs. She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly, and then she turned her cart around and walked the other way. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a slap. I was not Eleanor anymore. I was the girl who stole her grandmother's money. On Friday, the process server came to my apartment. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker. He asked if I was Eleanor Watson. I said yes. He handed me a thick envelope and told me to have a nice day. Inside was a petition filed in the probate court. Vivian had hired Kessler and Rowe, I knew the name, Everyone in Harborough knew the name. They were the firm you hired when you wanted to burn the earth. They were aggressive, expensive, and they did not lose. I sat on my floor and read the document. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It alleged undue influence. It alleged lack of testamentary capacity. It alleged suspicious circumstances. It took the most painful, intimate moments of the last year and twisted them into a legal weapon. Item 14. The respondent, Eleanor Watson, systematically isolated the decedent from her natural family. Systematically isolated, that was how they described me turning off Maggie's ringer so she could nap. Item 15. The respondent assumed control of the decedent's financial affairs during a period of cognitive decline. Assumed control, that was how they described me helping her write checks for the electric bill. I needed a lawyer. Arthur Sterling could not represent me. He was likely going to be a witness, and he represented the estate, not me personally. I spent the weekend researching. I could not afford the second most expensive firm in town, and I did not want someone who would play dirty. I wanted someone who believed me. I found a small firm called Barton Legal Group. The senior partner, Sarah Barton, had a reputation for being steady and terrifyingly smart. I got an appointment for Monday morning. Sarah Barton was a woman in her 50s with gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they could see through drywall. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. She read the petition Vivian had filed. She read the copy of the will. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. "I believe you, Eleanor," she said. The relief was so intense I almost cried. "But," she continued, "you need to understand what is about to happen. This is not about the truth. This is about perception. They are going to audit your life." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean that every text message you sent your grandmother is going to be read out of context." Sarah said, "Every time you bought groceries with her debit card, they will ask if you bought a candy bar for yourself. Every time you discouraged her from seeing your mother because she was tired, they will say you were isolating her. They will weaponize your tone of voice. They will subpoena your medical records to see if you have a history of instability. They will try to break you." I swallowed hard. "Why? Why go this far?" "Because $6 million is a lot of money," Sarah said, "and because grief makes people crazy. But mostly because your mother feels humiliated, and she has the resources to make you pay for it." I hired her on the spot. She gave me a list of tasks. The first one was to secure all of Maggie's documents. Everything. Every scrap of paper in that townhouse. I went back to Maggie's house that evening. It felt different now. It did not feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene. I turned on the lights and started in the office. Maggie was organized. She was a librarian for 30 years. Her filing cabinet was a thing of beauty. Every folder was labeled with a label maker, color-coded by category, blue for medical, green for financial, red for house. I started with the medical files. I wanted to find the competency evaluation Arthur had mentioned. I flipped through the hanging folders. Mammograms 2010 to 2020. Cardiology, prescriptions. I frowned. There was a gap. The plastic tab for the next folder was empty, but the label insert was lying on the bottom of the drawer. I picked it up. It read, POA/Health Proxy, 2024. The folder itself was gone. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I knew that folder. I had seen it 2 weeks ago. It contained the power of attorney documents and her healthcare proxy. It was thick. I checked the front of the drawer. I checked the back. I pulled out every other folder, thinking perhaps it had been misfiled. It was not there. I stood in the silent office, holding the little plastic label. Someone had removed the folder. Not just the papers inside, but the entire hanging file. Who had a key? I did, Arthur Sterling did, and Vivian. Vivian had a key because she had demanded 1 year ago for emergencies. And Maggie, who hated conflict, had given it to her. I took a picture of the empty space in the drawer with my phone. My hands were shaking. This was what Sarah had meant. The war had already started, and I was catching up. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Vivian. "We need to talk. I'm coming over." She did not mean my apartment. She meant the townhouse. She knew I was there. She probably saw my car. I met her in the foyer. She was wearing a trench coat, belted tightly at the waist. She did not take off her shoes. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to stop this," she said. She looked around the hallway, her eyes lingering on the grandfather clock. "This is embarrassing. Eleanor, for the whole family. You sued me." I said, "You are the one making it embarrassing." "I am correcting a mistake," she said smoothly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek blue folder. "I spoke to my lawyers. We are willing to offer a settlement." I stared at the folder. "A settlement? We can end this quietly," she said. "You sign a disclaimer disavowing the will. We agree that Maggie was not herself. The estate reverts to the previous will, where everything was split 50-50. 50-50, I repeated. "It is generous," Vivian said. "Considering the circumstances, considering what you did, I did not do anything." I said, "And Maggie did not want 50-50. She wanted this." Vivian's face hardened. She took a step closer to me. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. "Listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are a marketing director with a nice little life. Do you know what happens to your reputation if this goes to trial?" "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a promise," she said. "If you force me to fight this, I will destroy you. I will drag every skeleton out of your closet. I will make sure everyone in this town, every future employer, every friend you have, knows exactly what kind of predator you are." She held out the folder. "Do the decent thing. Eleanor, sign it." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I saw the desperate, clawing need in her eyes. It was not about the money. I realized that suddenly it was about control. She could not stand that Maggie had chosen me. She could not stand that she had lost the final argument. "No," I said. Vivian stood there for a long moment. She did not blink. Then she put the folder back in her bag. "Fine," she said. She turned and walked to the door. When she opened it, the sound of the rain filled the hall. "You are going to regret this." She slammed the door behind her. I locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I dragged a heavy dining chair over and wedged it under the handle. I knew it was irrational, but I felt unsafe in a way I never had before. I went into the kitchen. I needed tea. I needed to stop shaking. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. While I waited for it to boil, I leaned against the counter. My eyes drifted to the shelf of cookbooks above the stove. Maggie loved to cook. She had hundreds of recipes clipped from magazines and taped onto index cards. Her favorite book was a battered copy of The Joy of Cooking from the 1960s. The spine was broken, and the pages were stained with decades of gravy and oil. I pulled it down, needing the comfort of something familiar. I let it fall open. It opened to the section on pies. There was a folded piece of lined notepaper tucked between the pages. I frowned. It was not a recipe. I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Maggie's jagged, arthritic scrawl. "Eleanor, if they come for you, look where I kept my truth. Love, Gran." I stared at the paper. The date at the top was from 3 months ago. If they come for you. She knew. She had known this would happen. She had known Vivian would not let it go. "Look where I kept my truth." I read the line again. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the drafty house. What did that mean? Where did she keep her truth? I looked around the kitchen, the cabinets, the drawers, the pantry. It could be anywhere, or it could be a metaphor. Maggie loved puzzles. She loved riddles, but this did not feel like a game. It felt like a life raft. The kettle began to whistle, a high, shrieking sound that made me jump. I turned off the burner, but I did not make the tea. I stood there clutching the note, feeling the weight of the silent house pressing down on me. Vivian had promised to destroy me. She had money, she had power, and she had the ruthlessness to use them. But I had something else now. I had a message. Maggie had left me a map. I just had to figure out how to read it. And I had the sinking feeling that I did not have much time before Vivian tore the rest of the house apart, looking for whatever it was I was supposed to find. I folded the note and put it in my bra. close to my skin. I am listening. Gran, I whispered to the empty room. Show me the way. The rain hammered against the roof. Harder now, like it was trying to get in. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark, ready to fight. Discovery was a word that sounded like an adventure. It sounded like unearthing a chest of gold or finding a new continent. In probate litigation, I learned very quickly that discovery was actually an autopsy. It was the process of taking a living, breathing relationship, my relationship with my grandmother, and cutting it open on a cold steel table to weigh the organs. We were sitting in Sarah Barton's conference room, surrounded by boxes. The air smelled of toner and stale coffee. Sarah was explaining the timeline, but I was distracted by the sheer volume of paper that had already accumulated in just 10 days. Discovery is invasive. Eleanor, Sarah said, she was not trying to scare me. She was managing my expectations. They are entitled to ask for anything that might be relevant to Maggie's state of mind or your influence over her. What does that mean? I asked. It means they have subpoenaed your bank records. Sarah said, they want to see if you were in financial distress, if you had credit card debt, if you were desperate. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. I have student loans. I said, like everyone else. Sarah nodded. To a jury, student loans can look like a motive. They have also subpoenaed Maggie's phone records, her email archives, and every invoice from every service provider she used in the last 5 years. I looked at the stack of papers. They are going to read her emails? They are going to read everything. Sarah said. The first batch of documents arrived 2 days later. Vivian's lawyer, a shark named Marcus Kessler, had sent over copies of what they intended to use to prove Maggie was incompetent and that I was her puppet master. I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of cheap wine and read through them. It was a masterclass in distortion. They had subpoenaed the invoices from the private home health aid agency we had used for a few weeks after Maggie's hip surgery 2 years ago. The notes on the invoices were standard. Patient requires assistance with bathing. Patient confused about medication dosage. In Kessler's filing. This became, decedent was unable to perform basic hygiene and lacked the cognitive capacity to manage her own health, creating a dependency on the respondent. They had the receipts from the grocery delivery service. I had set up the account for Maggie because she could not lift heavy bags. I used my email address for the login so I could monitor the orders. Kessler framed it as, respondent controlled the decedent's access to food and necessities. It was nauseating. Every act of care was twisted into an act of control. Every time I had helped her, I had apparently been tightening a noose. I realized with a sinking heart that the truth did not matter. The facts were just raw clay, and Vivian had hired a sculptor who knew exactly how to mold them into a monster. I needed to talk to Arthur Sterling. Sarah had warned me against it, saying that since he was a witness, our conversations could be discoverable. But I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Arthur had been Maggie's attorney for 40 years. He had been at my high school graduation. The way he had read the will, cold, detached, did not sit right. I called his office and practically begged his secretary for 10 minutes. She squeezed me in at 4:00 on a Tuesday. Arthur looked worse than he had at the reading. His skin was the color of old paste, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured water from a crystal carafe. He did not offer me a seat. "Eleanor," he said, "you should not be here. I need to understand." "Arthur," I said. I was standing by the door, clutching my purse. "You knew her. You knew she was sharp as a tack until the day she died. Why are you letting Vivian say she was incompetent?" "I am not letting anyone say anything." Arthur said. His voice was tight. "The court will decide. You wrote the will." I said, "You were there. You have to testify that she knew what she was doing." Arthur looked away. He looked at the bookshelf behind him, lined with leather-bound volumes of case law. "Maggie changed her plan," he said softly. "It was sudden. It was not sudden." I argued. "We talked about it. She wanted to protect the house. She changed it after the incident." Arthur said. The room went very quiet. I frowned. "What incident?" I asked. Arthur's eyes snapped back to mine. He looked panicked, as if he had said too much. "I cannot discuss this with you. Eleanor, you have counsel. All communication must go through Ms. Barton." "Arthur, please," I said, taking a step forward. "What incident? Was Vivian involved?" He stood up abruptly. "I have a meeting," he said. "You have to leave. Now." He practically ushered me out of the door. As I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed frosted glass, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The incident. What had happened that I did not know about? And why was Arthur Sterling, a man who had faced down IRS audits and corporate mergers without blinking, so clearly terrified? I drove to Maggie's townhouse. I needed to feel close to her. I needed to be in her space. The building was a brownstone in the historic district. It had a heavy iron gate and a small lobby that smelled of floor wax. I greeted the doorman, a nice guy named Henry who had worked there for a decade. He looked at me with pity. "Afternoon, Ms. Watson," he said. "Here to check on things? Just picking up some mail." I lied. I took the elevator up, but instead of going to the penthouse, I hit the button for the basement. Each unit had a storage room down there, a metal cage where residents kept Christmas decorations and old luggage. Maggie kept her travel trunks and boxes of my grandfather's books there. The basement was cool and dim, lit by buzzing fluorescent strips. I walked down the concrete corridor, the heels of my boots clicking echoing against the walls. Unit 4B. I stopped. The cage was wire mesh, so you could see inside. There were the trunks, there were the boxes, but the door to the cage was secured with a padlock. Maggie had used an old master lock with a blue dial. I knew the combination. Right to 14, left to 32, right to 8. The lock hanging on the hasp was brand new. It was a heavy-duty silver block with a keyhole. I stared at it. My breath hitched. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keyring. I had a key to the padlock Maggie used to use on the back gate. Sometimes she swapped them. I tried it, jamming it into the new lock. It did not fit. It did not even go in halfway. I rattled the door. It held fast. Someone had changed the lock. I turned and ran back to the elevator. I found Henry in the lobby, sorting envelopes. "Henry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The storage unit. The lock has changed." "Oh, yes," Henry said. He did not look up. "Your mother was here last week. Said she lost the combination and needed to secure some valuables. She had a locksmith drill the old one." "My mother," I repeated. "Vivian. She showed me the papers," Henry said, looking apologetic. "The court papers. Said she was what is the word? Executor?" "No, that is not it. Administrator," I suggested. "My blood running cold." "That is the one," Henry said. "Said she needed access to inventory the estate. She is not the administrator." I said, "I am." Henry's face fell. "Oh, well, she had a letter from a lawyer. Looked official." I thanked him and walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could not get the key into the ignition. Vivian had been in the storage unit. She had drilled the lock. She had gone through the boxes. What was she looking for? And more importantly, what had she found? I felt a sharp, humiliating panic. It was the feeling of coming home to find your front door open. It was a violation. Vivian was not just fighting me in court. She was scavenging through the wreckage of Maggie's life, picking the bones clean before I could even say goodbye. I drove to the townhouse, parked, and let myself in. I engaged the deadbolt. I checked the windows. I felt like I was under siege. I went to the kitchen and stood in front of the stove. I reached into my bra. I had started carrying the note there, irrational as it was, and unfolded the paper. "If they come for you, look where I kept my truth." She knew Vivian would come. She knew Vivian would pry and drill and steal. Where I kept my truth? It wasn't in the storage unit. Maggie was too smart for that. The storage unit was for things she didn't need often. The truth was something she needed close. I looked around the living room. Bookshelves, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Maggie was a librarian. Books were her sanctuary. I started pulling books off the shelves. I didn't know what I was looking for. A hollowed-out volume? An envelope taped between pages? I worked for 2 hours. I created a pile of rejects on the floor. Nothing. Just dust and the smell of old paper. I sat back on my heels. Frustrated. Think, Eleanor. Where I kept my truth. Maggie didn't just read books. She cataloged them. She believed in systems. I went to her desk. In the top drawer, buried under a box of paper clips, was her wallet. I hadn't touched it since she died. It felt wrong, like pickpocketing a ghost. I opened it. Her driver's license, a few $20 bills, a picture of me from the 3rd grade, and her library card. It was worn, the laminate peeling at the corners. Harbor Brook Public Library. I flipped it over. Taped to the back of the card was a thin, translucent slip of paper. It looked like a receipt. I peeled it off carefully. The ink was faded. It was a receipt for an annual fee. Harbor Brook First National Bank. Safe Deposit Box Rental. Box 402. I stared at it. I didn't know she had a safe deposit box. She kept her jewelry in a velvet roll in her dresser. She kept her cash in the cookie jar. Where I kept my truth. A safe deposit box was a place for secrets. I looked at the clock. It was 3:30. The bank closed at 5. I grabbed the death certificate, the letter of testamentary that Sarah had rushed to get me, and my ID. I drove to the bank like I was driving a getaway car. Harbor Brook. First National was an old building with marble floors and a ceiling that echoed. I walked up to the customer service desk. The woman behind the counter, a name tag reading Brenda, smiled at me. "Can I help you?" "I need to access a safe deposit box," I said. "My grandmother passed away. I am the executor." I laid the papers on the desk. Brenda's smile turned into a practiced expression of sympathy. "I am so sorry for your loss," she said. "Let me check the records." She typed into her computer. Her eyebrows knit together. "Margaret Hale," she said. "Box 402. "Yes," I said. Brenda looked at me. "You are Eleanor Watson?" "Yes." "That is strange," Brenda said. "We had a request to access this box just 3 days ago." My heart stopped. "Who requested it?" I asked. Brenda turned the screen slightly away from me. "A woman. She presented a power of attorney. She said Mrs. Hale was too ill to come in herself." 3 days ago?" I said. "Maggie died 2 weeks ago." "A power of attorney expires at death." Brenda's face went pale. Oh, dear. "Who was it?" I demanded. "Was it Vivian Hale Watson?" Brenda looked nervous. "I cannot give out that information without a manager, but what?" "The signature on the access log." Brenda lowered her voice. My colleague remarked on it. It looked rushed, shaky, not like Mrs. Hale's usual signature. I felt the room spin. Vivian, or someone working for her, had tried to use a power of attorney to get into the box after Maggie was dead. That was fraud. That was a felony. Did they get in? I asked. The question came out as a whisper. Brenda checked the screen again. No. The manager on duty required a second form of ID from the principal, your grandmother. And the woman said she would come back later. She never did. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They didn't get in. I would like to open the box now. "Please," I said. Brenda nodded. She called a manager over. We went through the paperwork. It took 20 minutes. But finally, I was led into the vault. The box was long and narrow. I carried it to a private viewing room. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. I expected stacks of cash. I expected diamonds. Instead, there was a single manila envelope. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a page from a bank statement. Harbor Brook First National. Checking account ending in 8892. Most of the page was blacked out with a thick permanent marker. Only one line was visible. October 14th. Transfer to outbound, $15,000. And next to it, written in Maggie's shaky hand, "Why?" That was it. No explanation. Just a transfer I didn't recognize and a desperate question. I took a picture of the page with my phone. I put the original back in the box. I didn't want to remove it yet. I wanted it safe. I left the bank feeling dizzier than when I arrived. I had a clue. but it just led to more questions. What was the $15,000 for? And why had someone tried to break into the box to get this paper? I called Sarah Barton from the car. "We need Maggie's medical records," I said. "Now, not the summaries. The full charts. Already requested." Sarah said, "Why?" "Because Vivian is lying about the timeline," I said, "and because someone tried to access a safe deposit box with a fake signature 3 days after Maggie died." Sarah went silent on the other end. "Get to my office," she said. We spent the next day combing through the medical records that had just arrived digitally. It was grueling work, cross-referencing dates with legal documents, and then we found it. Vivian's petition claimed that Maggie had lacked capacity starting in November. She claimed Maggie was disoriented and confused constantly. I pointed to a line in the nursing notes from December 12th, the day Maggie signed the new will. 10 a.m., patient alert and oriented ×3, discussed current events. Patient completed crossword puzzle independently, vitals stable, alert and oriented, and then, 2 pages later, a note from a different doctor, dated 3 days before the will signing. Patient expresses anxiety regarding family conflict, states daughter is pressuring her regarding financial matters. Patient requests to speak with social worker. I stared at the screen. Vivian hadn't just lied. She had been the cause of the distress. Maggie wasn't confused. She was scared. "We have her," I said. "This proves she was competent. It helps," Sarah said, her face grim. "But look at this." She pointed to a note from January. A month later, patient's daughter, Vivian, called to request change in medication. States patient is hallucinating. Doctor. Evans denied request. No evidence of hallucinations observed. Vivian had tried to drug her, or at least, tried to create a paper trail that she needed drugs. I felt sick, physically sick. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was abuse. I went home that night feeling a heavy, dark exhaustion. I wanted to call someone, but who? My friends had all pulled back. The gossip blog had done its job. I was radioactive. I opened my laptop and checked social media. It was a form of self-harm, but I couldn't stop. Vivian's Facebook page was public. Her latest post was a photo of her and Maggie from 10 years ago, looking happy at a garden party, missing my mother every day. The caption read, "It is so hard to protect the legacy of those we love when others are blinded by greed. Elder abuse isn't always bruises. Sometimes it is manipulation. A daughter's duty never ends. #Justice for Maggie. #Family first." The comments were a chorus of sympathy. "So sorry you are going through this. Viv, she is lucky to have you fighting for her. Shocking what people will do for money." None of them used my name, but they didn't have to. I received a text message then. I flinched, expecting another cancellation from a friend or a demand from a lawyer. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No area code. "Your mom isn't the only one who wanted that money. Check Maggie's old phone." I stared at the screen. The bubble hovered there, glowing blue in the dark room. "Who is this?" I typed back. "Message send failure." The phone replied instantly. "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. A burner." I sat up straight. Maggie's old phone. Maggie had a smartphone for a few months, but she hated it. She went back to a flip phone, but she kept the smartphone in a drawer in the kitchen, mostly to look at photos of me. I hadn't seen the flip phone since the funeral. Vivian had been at the house sorting things before I locked her out. I grabbed my keys. I had to get back to the townhouse, if the phone was there. I had to find it, and if it wasn't, then I knew exactly who had taken it. The anonymous texter knew something. "Your mom isn't the only one. Who else? Grant Sorrell? The financial advisor Vivian mentioned once? The mysterious outbound on the bank statement?" The web was bigger than just a greedy daughter. There were other spiders in the dark. I drove through the rain, the wipers slapping a frantic rhythm against the glass. I was not just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was fighting a conspiracy, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. The text message from the burner phone burned a hole in my mind as I tore through the drawers of the mahogany sideboard in the dining room. Your mom isn't the only one who wanted that money. Check Maggie's old phone. I knew the phone. It was a silver flip phone, a relic from a decade ago that Maggie refused to give up because she liked the satisfying snap of closing it to end a call. She had kept it in the junk drawer in the kitchen, buried under rubber bands and takeout menus. I pulled the drawer open so hard it nearly came off its tracks, empty. I stared at the wood grain, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had seen that phone a month ago. I had used it to call the pharmacy when my own battery died. I moved to the living room. Vivian had been here. She had spent 2 days organizing before I had changed the locks. She called it helping. Now I knew it was sanitizing. I checked the desk. I checked the bedside tables. I checked the pockets of Maggie's coats in the hall closet. Nothing. I went back to the kitchen. There was one other place. Vivian had brought over a set of plastic bins on that first day, labeling them donations and keep. She had stacked the keep bins in the guest room closet. I dragged the first bin out. It was filled with old linens. The second was full of knitting supplies. The third bin was a jumble of electronics. Old charging cables, a broken digital camera, a tangled mess of earbuds. And there, at the bottom, was the silver flip phone. I grabbed it. It felt cold and light in my hand. I pressed the power button. Nothing. The battery was dead. I scrambled to find the charger. I found a compatible cable in the tangle and plugged it into the wall outlet by the baseboard. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, waiting for the little screen to light up. It took 5 minutes. When the logo finally appeared, I flipped it open. I went straight to the call log. No recent calls. I frowned. That was impossible. Maggie used this phone every day. She called me. She called her sister in Florida. She called the weather hotline. I went to the messages. No messages. I went to the photos. No images. I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. The phone had been wiped. Factory reset. I navigated to the settings menu, my thumb hovering over the keypad. I found the About Phone section. It listed the last system reset. The date was October 14th. I stared at the glowing numbers. October 14th. That was the Tuesday Maggie was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. She had been weak, barely able to sit up, let alone navigate the complex menu of a phone she barely knew how to silence. Someone else had done this, and they had done it while she was lying in a hospital bed, gasping for air. I took a picture of the screen with my own phone. It was negative evidence, the kind that proved a crime by the absence of something that should be there. Why wipe an old woman's flip phone? Unless there were calls on it that proved she was lucid, or calls that proved she was being harassed. I put the phone in a Ziploc bag and put it in my purse. I was done leaving things behind. The next morning, the reality of the legal war set in. I had a deposition preparation session with Sarah Barton. Sarah's office was a study in controlled chaos. Stacks of files lined the windowsills, blocking out the view of the Harbor Brook Harbor. I sat in a stiff chair while Sarah paced in front of a whiteboard. "They are going to try to make you angry." "Eleanor," Sarah said. She stopped and looked at me. "If you get angry, you look unstable. If you cry, you look emotionally fragile. If you are too calm, you look cold and calculating. So what am I supposed to be?" I asked. "You are supposed to be honest," Sarah said, "but a very specific kind of honest, when they ask why you were at the house every day. Do not say because she needed me. Say because I wanted to be with her. What is the difference?" "The first implies dependency," Sarah said. "It implies you were creating a need. The second implies affection." She grilled me for 3 hours. She played the part of Kessler, Vivian's attack dog attorney, Ms. Watson. "Did you ever discuss your student loans with your grandmother?" "No." "Did she know you were struggling to make rent?" "I was not struggling, but you carry a balance on your credit card. Do you not?" "Everyone does." "Answer the question." "Ms. Watson." I felt my temper fraying. It felt like a trap. Every answer I gave was just more rope for them to hang me with. At the end of the session, Sarah sat on the edge of her desk. "You are doing okay," she said, "but when you talk about Maggie, you stiffen up. You use past tense verbs like you are writing a report. She did. She is dead. Sarah. I said. My voice cracked. I know, Sarah said softly. But the jury needs to feel the loss. They need to see that you aren't fighting for the money. You are fighting for her memory. Can you say I loved her without sounding like you practiced it in a mirror? I looked down at my hands. I loved her more than anyone, I whispered. She was the only one who didn't make me feel like a disappointment. Sarah nodded. Say that, she said, just like that. I left the office feeling raw. I needed to find out who the others were. The text message had said your mom isn't the only one. I decided to track down Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins had been Maggie's home health aide for the 6 weeks after her surgery 2 years ago, but she had also come in sporadically to help with heavy cleaning until a few months ago. Vivian had fired her abruptly in September, claiming she was stealing silver. Maggie had cried about it, swearing Mrs. Higgins was honest, but Vivian had insisted. I found Mrs. Higgins living in a small apartment complex on the south side of town. She opened the door with the chain still on. Eleanor, she said, peering through the crack. Hi, Mrs. Higgins. I said, I am sorry to just show up. Can I talk to you for a minute? She hesitated, then undid the chain. She looked older than I remembered, her face lined with worry. The apartment smelled of potpourri and bleach. I heard about your grandmother, she said, gesturing for me to sit on a plastic-covered sofa. A real lady. She was Mrs. Higgins. I said, I know Vivian fired you. I know it wasn't true about the silver, Mrs. Higgins looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. Your mother is a difficult woman, Eleanor. I didn't take a thing. I know. I said, I am fighting her in court. She is trying to say Maggie was incompetent, that I tricked her. Mrs. Higgins let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You? Tricked her? You were the only one she trusted. Will you say that? I asked. Will you tell a judge? Her face closed off instantly. Oh, no, I cannot get involved. I have a new job now. I cannot have trouble. Please, I said, I just need to know what happened in those last months. Why was Vivian so aggressive? Mrs. Higgins stood up and walked to the window. She pulled the curtain back slightly, looking out at the parking lot. She was scared. Mrs. Higgins said quietly, Who? Maggie? Yes, towards the end, before I was let go. She would get phone calls. She would shake afterward. Did she say who it was? No, Mrs. Higgins said. But one day, I came in and she was hiding papers under the cushion of her chair. She looked at me with eyes like a frightened bird. She said, He keeps insisting I sign. Martha. But I want it in writing. I want everything in writing. He? I asked. A man? Mrs. Higgins nodded. Not your mother. A man. She was terrified of making a mistake. Who was he? Did you ever see him? Mrs. Higgins shook her head. No, but the day I was fired, I saw a car in the driveway, a black sedan, expensive, and your mother was standing by the window, talking to someone in the passenger seat. She looked like she was taking orders. She turned back to me. Her hands were trembling. That is all I know. Eleanor, please go. I left, my mind racing. A man, a black sedan, Vivian taking orders. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a shakedown. I went back to the townhouse building. I needed to see the security logs. Henry the doorman was on duty again. He looked nervous when he saw me. Ms. Watson, he said, I am not supposed to show you the logs. Your mother's lawyer called the management company. I am the executor. Henry, I said, pulling out the letter of testamentary again. It was getting wrinkled. I have the legal right to see who entered my property. Henry sighed and turned the logbook around. It was a physical book. The digital system had been down for upgrades in October. Ironically, I scanned the dates from September and October. Vivian Hale Watson, delivery, flowers, and then, on 3 separate occasions in late evenings, an entry that just read, Visitor, 4B, no name. Henry, I said, pointing to the line. Who is this? Henry squinted. Oh, That guy. What guy? The suit. Henry said. Sharp dresser. Always in a rush. Said he was a consultant working with Mrs. Hale on her portfolio. Did he give a name? He flashed a badge. Henry said, but the scanner was down. Remember? I just wrote visitor. He seemed like he belonged. He had that air. You know? Like he owned the place. I flipped the page. On the night of October 14th, the night the phone was wiped, the night Maggie went to the hospital, the log showed an entry at 9 p.m. Vivian Hale Watson guest. They had come together. I thanked Henry and went upstairs. I sat in Maggie's living room and called Sarah. We need to subpoena the bank records again. I said, look for transfers to a consulting firm. Look for anything that matches the dates in the logbook. Sarah was way ahead of me. I just got the response from the bank. She said, check your email. I opened the file on my phone. It was a list of transactions from Maggie's primary checking account. Starting in August, there were monthly transfers of $12,000. The recipient was Sentinel Global Consulting, LLC. I copied the name and pasted it into a search engine. Nothing, no website, no LinkedIn. I searched the business registry. Sentinel Global Consulting, LLC, registered agent, United Mail Services, address, 4055 Strip Mall Boulevard, Suite 104. I knew that address. It was a pack and ship store next to a dry cleaner. It was a mail drop. Vivian had insisted these were for financial planning, but legitimate financial planners do not operate out of a mailbox in a strip mall, and they do not take $50,000 in 4 months from an 82-year-old woman without a paper trail. I felt a wave of nausea. They were draining her, slowly, systematically, and when she tried to stop it, when she demanded things in writing, they panicked. My life outside the case began to disintegrate. I went to work, but I was a ghost. I sat in meetings and heard nothing but the static in my own head. My boss, a woman named Linda who had always been kind, called me into her office on Thursday. Eleanor, she said gently, you snapped at the intern today for using the wrong font. I rubbed my temples. I am sorry. Linda, I am just under a lot of pressure. I know, she said, but we have a business to run. Maybe you should take some leave. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. I went home and sat on my couch in the dark. I was afraid to sleep. I kept my phone on the pillow next to my ear. Flinching every time it buzzed, I was terrified it would be Vivian, or the burner number, or the police telling me I had been evicted. I was drinking too much coffee and not eating enough. My clothes were hanging loose on my frame. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger with hollow eyes and gray skin. I hated myself for it. I hated that I was letting them win without them even stepping into a courtroom. I hated that every time I thought of my mother. I didn't feel love or even anger anymore. I felt dread, pure, animal dread. On Friday afternoon, Vivian texted, "Can we meet? No lawyers, just us. Please, I want to fix this." I met her at a coffee shop on the edge of town, a neutral ground. She was sitting in a booth, wearing a soft cashmere sweater in a pale pink color that made her look vulnerable. She had minimal makeup on. She looked like the mother who used to bake me birthday cakes, not the woman who had drilled a lock. She said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back. She flinched, looking hurt. "I deserve that," she said softly. "What do you want?" "Vivian?" I asked. "I want my daughter back," she said. Tears welled up in her eyes, real tears. I watched them track down her cheeks and wondered if she could summon them on command or if she actually believed her own performance. "This lawsuit, it is tearing us apart," she said. "I never wanted this." "Then drop it," I said. She sighed, a long, shuddering breath. "I cannot, not completely. I have to protect Maggie's legacy, and I have to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From yourself," she said. $6 million is a burden. Eleanor, you are young. You are not ready for that kind of responsibility. And with the rumors. She reached into her bag and pulled out a document. It wasn't the blue folder from before. It was a single sheet of paper. I have a proposal, she said. We put the estate into a temporary trust. I will be the trustee. Just for 2 years, just until things settle down. You will get a monthly allowance, a generous one. You can quit your job. You can travel. You can heal. I stared at the paper. Temporary Revocable Trust. Trustee. Vivian Hale Watson. It was a trap. Once she had control, she would never give it back. She would drain it dry, funneling it to Sentinel Global Consulting or whoever the man in the suit was. And what happens in 2 years? I asked. We reassess, she said, smiling through her tears. We be a family again. I looked at her. I looked at the way her fingers were drumming a microscopic, nervous rhythm on the table. Who is Sentinel Global Consulting? I asked. The rhythm stopped. Her face went perfectly still. I do not know what you are talking about, she said. The $12,000 transfers, I said. The man in the suit who visited Maggie at night? The man you brought to the house the night she was hospitalized? Vivian's eyes hardened. The tears evaporated instantly. The softness in her face vanished, replaced by something sharp and cold, like steel revealed under melting ice. You are confused, she said. I am not confused. I said, I know you wiped the phone. I know you drilled the lock. And I'm not signing anything. I stood up. Vivian didn't move. She didn't yell. She just looked up at me, and her expression was terrifyingly calm. Then I will take it from you in court, she said. Her voice was conversational, as if she were commenting on the weather. And when I am done, Eleanor, you won't even have enough left to buy a bus ticket out of this town. I walked away. I felt her eyes boring into my back until I turned the corner. I drove straight to the townhouse. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. She was going to destroy me. She had the money, she had the lawyers, and she had the secrets. I locked the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. If they come for you, look where I kept my truth. I pulled the note out of my bra. It was soft now, worn from being carried against my skin for days. I had looked in the books. I had looked in the safe deposit box, where I kept my truth. Maggie wasn't a poet. She was a pragmatist. She didn't speak in riddles unless she had to. I closed my eyes and tried to picture her. I pictured her moving through this house. I pictured her hiding things. She used to hide the spare house key for me when I was a teenager. She didn't put it under the mat. She said that was the first place thieves looked. She taped it behind the framed photo of the dog in the mudroom. Look behind the things you love, she used to say. Nobody moves the things you love. I stood up. What did Maggie love? She loved me. She loved her garden. She loved the ocean. There was a painting in the dining room. It was a watercolor of the Maine coastline. Gray waves crashing against jagged rocks. It wasn't valuable art. It was something she had bought on her honeymoon with my grandfather 50 years ago. She loved it because she said it looked like how freedom felt, where I kept my truth, the ocean, the truth, nature. It was a stretch. But I was desperate. I walked into the dining room. The painting hung above the sideboard. It was heavy, framed in dark wood. I lifted it off the hook. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light. I turned the frame over. The backing was brown paper, brittle with age. But in the bottom right corner, the paper had been slit and taped back together with clear Scotch tape. I peeled the tape back. Underneath, taped to the cardboard backing, was a small brass key. It wasn't a door key. It was tiny, a luggage key, or a diary key, or a tin key. I grabbed it. My hands were shaking. Where was the lock? I ran to the pantry. Maggie kept a collection of old decorative tins on the top shelf. Tins for tea, tins for biscuits, tins that were just pretty. I pulled down the step stool. I climbed up and started grabbing them. The Earl Grey tin was empty. The shortbread tin held sewing buttons. The floral tin held old batteries. Then I saw it. A small, black metal box, shoved way in the back, behind the fondue pot she hadn't used in 20 years. It looked like a petty cash box. I pulled it down. It was heavy. I jumped off the stool and set it on the kitchen counter. I inserted the brass key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. There was no money inside, no jewelry. There was a USB flash drive. It was red, bright against the black velvet lining of the box, and taped to the inside of the lid was a label, written in Maggie's hand. The letters firm and angry, E, W, play when they lie. I stared at it. Play when they lie. They were lying. They were lying about everything. I picked up the flash drive. It felt hot in my hand. I ran to the living room and grabbed my laptop. I sat on the floor, the computer balancing on my knees. I plugged the drive into the USB port. A folder popped up on the screen. It was labeled Evidence. I opened it. There were files, scanned PDFs, and one video file, truth.mp4. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I was alone in the house, but I felt like the whole world was watching. This was it. This was the voice from the grave. I took a deep breath, and I clicked play. The red flash drive sat on my coffee table like a live coal. I had stared at it for an hour before I finally worked up the courage to plug it into my laptop. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the wind rattling the loose sash in the kitchen window. I felt like a bomb disposal technician, waiting for the wire that would blow up my life. I inserted the drive. The computer chimed. A window opened. There were 2 items inside. One was a folder labeled Docs. The other was a video file labeled truth.mp4. My heart hammered a rhythm against my ribs. I double-clicked the video file. A dialog box popped up. Enter password. I sat back, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. Of course, Maggie was a librarian. She understood the concept of restricted access. She wouldn't leave the most dangerous story of her life unlocked for just anyone to find. I tried the obvious things first. Her birthday, my birthday, her address, the name of her first dog. Barnaby. Incorrect password. Incorrect password. I tried the last 4 digits of her social security number. I tried the date of my grandfather's death. Incorrect password. Panic began to rise in my chest. A cold tide. I had the truth in my hands. But it was locked inside a digital vault, and I didn't have the key. I needed help. I couldn't go to Sarah Barton with this yet. If I couldn't open it, it wasn't evidence. It was just a piece of plastic. I picked up my phone and called Ben. Ben was a coworker from the marketing department, the kind of guy who lived in hoodies and could recover a crashed hard drive while eating a sandwich. We had bonded over shared eye rolls during staff meetings. He was the only person at work who hadn't treated me like a pariah since the gossip blog article came out. I need a favor. I told him when he answered. A big one, and you can never tell anyone about it. Bring it over, he said without hesitating. I drove to his apartment on the north side of Harbor It smelled of coffee and soldering iron. I sat on a beanbag chair while Ben plugged the drive into his massive multi-screen setup. He typed furiously for a few minutes, lines of code scrolling down his monitor in green and white. It is encrypted, Ben said. AES 256. Military grade? No, but consumer grade tough. Brute forcing it would take years. He spun his chair around, but there is a hint. A hint? Yeah. The user set up a password hint. He pointed to the screen. I leaned in. The text was small, white against the black background. Hint. What I sang when the thunder came. The room blurred. I was 5 years old. I was staying at Maggie's house while my parents were arguing, which they did often in those days. A summer storm had rolled in off the Atlantic, shaking the old townhouse, rattling the windows in their frames. I was terrified. I had crawled under the dining room table, sobbing, convinced the sky was falling. Maggie had crawled in with me. She didn't tell me to stop crying. She didn't tell me to be brave. She just held me and hummed a song. It wasn't a normal lullaby. It was an old folk song she loved. Something about a boat in the sea. Speed Bonnie boat. Like a bird on the wing. I closed my eyes. The Sky Boat song. Try Sky Boat, I whispered. Ben typed it in. Access denied. Try it with spaces. I said, the Sky Boat song. Ben typed. He hit enter. The folder unlocked. I let out a sob that was half laugh, half wail. She had picked something that only I would know, not Vivian, not the lawyers, just me. It was a secret language of shared trauma and comfort, codified into a security key. Ben opened the video file. The media player launched. The screen went black for a second, and then Maggie appeared. She was sitting at her kitchen table. She was wearing her blue cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, but her face was pale, and her eyes looked tired. She looked straight into the lens. "If you are watching this," she said, her voice steady but thin. "They have started." I pressed my hand to my mouth. "I am making this recording because I do not trust my own memory anymore." Maggie continued, "Not because it is failing, but because they are trying to convince me it is. Vivian was here yesterday. She brought a man named—" The screen froze. A jagged line of green pixels tore across Maggie's face. A screech of audio feedback pierced the room, making me jump. Ben frowned. He tapped the keyboard. The video skipped forward 3 seconds, then froze again. The audio was a garbled, robotic mess. "Sign the—" Never agreed. "Money is for—" Then the screen went black. "What happened?" I asked, my voice rising. Ben looked grim. "The file is corrupted. Can you fix it?" He shook his head. "It looks like a write error, like the file was interrupted while it was saving, or—" He hesitated. "Or someone tried to delete it and did a messy job." He tried to play it again. We got the same 5 seconds. "If you are watching this, they have started." And then, chaos. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I had the intro to a confession, but not the confession itself. "Check the documents," Ben said gently. We opened the docs folder. These files were intact. There was a PDF labeled Draft Letter to Court. It was a letter Maggie had written to Judge Sterling, Arthur's brother, who was a judge in the neighboring county, asking for advice on how to revoke a power of attorney without alerting the agent. It was dated September 12th. There was a folder of screenshots. They were text messages between Maggie and Vivian. Vivian: "You need to sign the papers. Mother, Grant is waiting." Maggie: "I told you I do not understand these terms. I want Arthur to see them." Vivian: "Arthur is old and slow. Grant can handle it today. Do not be difficult." And then there was a document simply titled Pressure Days. It was a log. Maggie had kept a diary of harassment. August 4th. Vivian called 4 times, shouting about the house maintenance costs. August 12th. The man in the suit came back. He knocked for 10 minutes. I did not open the door. September 1st. Vivian said if I do not let them manage the portfolio, the state will take it when I die. Is this true? I read the list. Tears streaming down my face. She had been under siege. She had been fighting a war alone in that big, empty house, recording the battles on a spreadsheet because she didn't know who else to tell. "This helps," Ben said. "It proves duress. It proves she was scared." I said, "But it doesn't prove the fraud. It doesn't prove they stole the money." The video was supposed to be the smoking gun. I thanked Ben and took the drive. I drove home feeling heavier than before. I had a piece of the puzzle, but the center was missing. The next morning, the war escalated. I was drinking coffee, trying to summon the energy to shower. When Sarah Barton called, "Get down to the courthouse," she said. "Now, Vivian has filed an emergency motion." "For what?" I asked. "Spoliation of evidence." Sarah said, "and dissipation of assets. She is claiming you are looting the house." I arrived at the courthouse in 20 minutes. The hearing was in a small motions room, not the main courtroom. Vivian was there, flanked by Marcus Kessler. She was wearing black again, looking mournful and elegant. She wouldn't look at me. Judge Ramirez looked bored. He had a stack of files in front of him. "Mr. Kessler," the judge said, "you are alleging that the administrator is destroying property?" "We have reason to believe." "Your Honor," Kessler said, his voice smooth and baritone, "that Ms. Watson has removed electronic devices from the decedent's home, specifically a cellular phone and a computer hard drive. We also have witness testimony that she was seen removing boxes from the premises late at night." He was talking about the flip phone, and the night I took the books off the shelves looking for the key. She is hiding assets. Kessler continued. We believe she is liquidating personal property to fund her defense. It is a lie. I blurted out. Ms. Watson, the judge snapped. You will speak through your attorney. Sarah stood up. Your Honor, my client has secured the property as is her duty as executor. She has removed nothing of value. The items in question are being catalogued. We want an immediate injunction. Kessler said, We want a court-appointed receiver to take over the estate assets immediately. Ms. Watson cannot be trusted. The judge looked at me. His eyes were cold. He didn't see a granddaughter protecting her grandmother's wishes. He saw a defendant. I will not appoint a receiver yet, the judge said, but I am issuing a temporary restraining order on all estate assets. Ms. Watson, you are to provide a full, itemized inventory of every single item in that townhouse, down to the silverware, within 48 hours. If anything is missing, I will hold you in contempt. I walked out of the courtroom shaking. I felt like my voice had been surgically removed. I sat on a bench in the hallway while Sarah packed her briefcase. How did they know? I whispered. How did they know what? Sarah asked. How did they know I took the phone? I found it in a bin deep in the closet. I put it in my purse. No one saw me. Sarah stopped. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Are you sure? I am positive. The blinds were drawn. Sarah tapped her pen against her chin. And Kessler's filing. He mentioned a hard drive. Did you take a hard drive? I took the flash drive. I said, but that was hidden in a tin in the pantry. Sarah looked down the hall at Kessler, who was laughing at something Vivian had said. They know too much. Sarah said, they are referencing things they shouldn't know unless they have eyes inside that house. Or what? Or unless they have access to Maggie's digital footprint that we don't know about. Electronic monitoring. I felt a chill. The man in the suit, Grant, Sarah. I said, I found the name of the LLC. Sentinel Global Consulting. I tracked the money. She looked at me sharp. And? It connects to a financial advisor named Grant Sorrell. Sarah's face went still. Sorrell? I know that name. You do? He is slippery. Sarah said. He operates on the fringe. He targets high-net-worth seniors. He sells them asset protection packages that are basically schemes to churn fees. He has never been indicted, but he has been sued civilly 6 times for deceptive practices. He is the one, I said. I am sure of it. Stay away from him. Eleanor, Sarah warned, he is dangerous. Not physically. Maybe. But he can ruin you. I nodded. But I knew I wasn't going to stay away. I went home and spent the next 6 hours creating the inventory for the court. I counted spoons. I counted towels. I counted the number of books on the shelves. It was a humiliating, tedious penance, but my mind was on Grant Sorrell. I looked him up on the public docket. Sorrell versus Estate of Henderson, Miller versus Sorrell. The complaints were all similar: undue pressure, unexplained fees, complex insurance products that locked up money for years. He was a predator in a bespoke suit. The next day, I put on my best blazer. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I drove to the address listed for Sorrell's actual office. Not the mail drop. It was in a glass building downtown. The kind with a waterfall in the lobby. Sorrell Wealth Management. The receptionist was young and polished. Do you have an appointment? I am Eleanor Watson. I said, I am here to discuss the Margaret Hale estate. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. A moment later, a door opened. Grant Sorrell walked out. He was handsome in a generic, television actor way. Tan skin, white teeth, a suit that fit perfectly. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like the guy who buys you a drink at the airport bar. Eleanor, he said, extending a hand. I was wondering when we would meet. I didn't shake it. I want to talk to you about Sentinel Global Consulting. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes did a quick, assessing sweep of the room. Why don't you come back? His office was corner, with a view of the harbor. He sat behind a glass desk and gestured to a chair. I stood. You took $50,000 from my grandmother. I said, for what? For services rendered. Grant said smoothly. Complex estate planning, asset protection strategies. Maggie was very concerned about tax liabilities. Maggie didn't care about taxes. I said, she cared about her garden, and you pressured her. I have her notes. Grant, I have the dates you came to her house at night. Grant leaned back in his chair. He tented his fingers. You are grieving. Eleanor, he said, I understand that. Grief makes us look for villains, but Maggie was a friend. She wanted to be taken care of. She felt vulnerable. We simply provided her with security. You provided her with fear. I said, you and Vivian. You scared her into signing over control. Grant stood up. He walked around the desk and leaned against the front of it, crossing his ankles. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne. It smelled expensive and metallic. Let me give you some advice. Eleanor, he said. His voice dropped an octave. It was soft, almost intimate. Probate court is an ugly place. It is very hard on young women who seem greedy. Greedy? I repeated, incredulous. Vivian is her daughter, Grant said, the natural heir. You are the granddaughter who swooped in at the last minute. The court sees that pattern every day. If you drag this out, if you try to make this about fraud or conspiracy, you are going to find yourself under a microscope you cannot survive. We will look at your finances, your personal life, everything. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a reality check, he said. Go home. Take the settlement Vivian offered. It is more money than you have ever seen in your life. Don't be a martyr. I looked at him. I saw the arrogance radiating off him like heat. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a girl with a student loan and a broken heart. I am not settling, I said, and I'm going to find the rest of that video. For a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes widened just a fraction. The rest of that video? He didn't know I had it, or he didn't know how much I had. Get out, he said. I walked out of the building, my legs shaking, but I felt something new. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was furious. I went home and opened a fresh notebook. I started writing. Date, November 4th. Time, 2:15 p.m. Location, Sorrel Wealth Management. Conversation with Grant Sorrel. He admitted to knowing Maggie. He admitted to the services. He threatened to investigate my personal life if I didn't settle. I wrote it all down. If I was going to be audited, I was going to audit them back. I was living for the record now. Every interaction, every text, every glance was evidence. I felt like I was preparing for my own disbelief, creating a paper trail to prove I hadn't gone crazy. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the glitching video kept playing in my mind. If you are watching this, they have started. Why did it cut out? Ben said it looked like a deletion or a bad transfer. If Maggie recorded it on her computer, maybe the original file was still there? No. Vivian had seized the computer on day one, but Maggie didn't have a webcam. She didn't trust them. She used a camera. I sat up in bed. Maggie had an old Canon digital camera. She used it to take pictures of her roses. She used to carry it in a beige canvas bag. Where was the camera? It wasn't in the electronics bin where I found the phone. I hadn't seen it in the office. I mentally walked through the house, the coat closet, the mudroom, the linen closet, the front hall closet, the one under the stairs where she kept the winter coats and the vacuum cleaner. I got out of bed. I couldn't go back to the townhouse. It was 3 a.m, and after the court order, going in at night would look suspicious. I had to wait for daylight. I paced my apartment until the sun came up. At 8 a.m., I drove to the townhouse. I let myself in, announcing my presence to the empty air in case they had installed cameras. I am here to conduct the inventory, I said loudly. I went to the closet under the stairs. I pushed aside the wool coats that smelled of mothballs. I moved the vacuum. There, in the back corner, sat the beige canvas bag. I grabbed it and carried it to the kitchen table. I unzipped it. The camera was inside. It was a bulky model from 10 years ago. I turned it on. No memory card. My heart sank. Of course, they had taken the card. Vivian or Grant had found the camera, taken the card, and probably destroyed it. I sat there, staring at the empty slot. Defeat tasted like ash in my mouth. I began to zip the bag back up. As I did, my finger brushed against something stiff in the lining of the side pocket. It wasn't a pocket. It was a tear in the fabric. I felt the shape. Small, square, plastic. I grabbed a steak knife from the counter and carefully cut the stitching of the lining. I pulled it out, a black SD card, and wrapped around it a small scrap of paper, secured with a rubber band. I pulled the paper free. The rest. It read. I stared at the card. Maggie hadn't just hidden the flash drive. She had anticipated the glitch. Or maybe she had run out of space on the first card and had to switch. Or maybe she knew that redundancy was the only way to survive a purge. She had hidden the source. I didn't wait for Ben. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I had bought a card reader dongle the day before, just in case. I plugged the card in. The folder opened. DCIM 100C ANON. There was one file. MVI_0492.mov. It was large, 2 gigabytes. I clicked it. The video opened. The image was crisp. Maggie was sitting at the table. If you are watching this, they have started, she said. I held my breath, waiting for the glitch, waiting for the static. 5 seconds passed. I am making this recording because I do not trust my own memory anymore. 10 seconds. Vivian was here yesterday. She brought a man named Grant Sorrell. He told me that if I did not sign the power of attorney, the government would take my house. The video continued. It was smooth. It was clear. Maggie looked into the camera, her eyes filling with tears but her voice unwavering. They are trying to confuse me. They are moving my papers. They are changing the dates on my calendar. But I am not confused. Eleanor, I am tired, and I am heartbroken. She took a deep breath. I am leaving everything to you. Eleanor, not because I do not love your mother, but because if I leave it to her, that man will take it all. And because you are the only one who never asked me for a thing. I watched the screen, tears blurring my vision. Vivian, Maggie said, leaning closer to the lens. If you are hearing this, stop. Stop hurting us. And stop lying. The video was 20 minutes long. It detailed everything. The coercion, the forged signatures, the late-night visits. I sat back in the chair. The silence of the house was different now. It wasn't empty. I had her voice. I had the whole story. And I knew exactly what I had to do. The silence in Sarah Barton's office was absolute. It was not the quiet of a library or a church. It was the vacuum that follows an explosion. We had just watched the full 20 minutes of the video file I had recovered from the hidden memory card. The image on Sarah's laptop screen was frozen on the final frame. Maggie's face. Tear-streaked, but resolute, staring into the lens with a terrifying clarity. Sarah leaned back in her chair. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She did not speak for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive and the distant wail of a siren 3 streets over. Finally, she looked at me. Eleanor, she said. Her voice was low. You understand what this is. It is the truth. I said, it is proof she was competent. It is proof she wanted me to have the estate. Sarah shook her head slowly. It is more than that. This is not just evidence for a probate contest. This is evidence of a felony. I felt the blood drain from my face. A felony? Sarah pointed a pen at the screen. Your grandmother describes, in specific detail, acts of coercion. She describes forgery. She describes a conspiracy to defraud her of her assets while she was alive. If we enter this into the record, we are not just asking a judge to uphold a will. We are handing a prosecutor a roadmap to indict your mother for elder abuse, fraud, and theft. I looked at the frozen image of Maggie. I had been so focused on clearing my name, on proving I wasn't the villain, that I hadn't fully calculated the cost of victory. This changes everything, Sarah said, her voice clinical but heavy with warning. but it also changes what your mother is exposed to. If we play this in court, there is no going back. You cannot unring this bell. Vivian could go to prison. Grant Sorrell definitely will. Prison. The word hung in the air like smoke. I thought of Vivian in her cashmere sweaters, with her perfect manicures and her fear of drafty rooms. I tried to picture her in a cell. It seemed impossible. And yet, looking at the video, it seemed inevitable. Do we have to play it? I asked. The question tasted like ash. If you want to win, yes, Sarah said. Without this, it is a he said, she said. With this, it is game over. But you need to decide what justice looks like to you. Is it the money, or is it the truth? It is the truth, I said, but I don't want to destroy her. Sarah looked at me with a pity that made me bristle. Eleanor, she said softly, she is already destroyed. She destroyed herself the moment she forged that signature. You are just the one turning on the lights. I went home that night and watched the video again. I needed to desensitize myself to it. I needed to stop seeing my grandmother and start seeing the witness. The footage was devastating. Maggie sat at her kitchen table, the morning sun illuminating the dust motes around her. She spoke with a precision that defied every claim of dementia Vivian had filed. I need to record this, Maggie said on the screen, because Vivian is trying to rewrite history before I have even left it. She described the hospital stay in October. I was on oxygen. Maggie said, I could barely keep my eyes open. Vivian came in with a stack of papers. She told me they were for the insurance. She said if I did not sign them, the hospital would discharge me. But I read the top page. It was a durable power of attorney. It gave her control of the checking account. I told her no. I told her I wanted Arthur to see it. Maggie paused in the video, taking a sip of water. Her hand shook, but her voice didn't. She got angry. She told me I was being selfish. She said I was losing my mind and that she was the only one who could save me. Then she brought that man in. Grant. He stood at the foot of the bed and smiled like a shark. He told me that Eleanor, he used your name, dear, he said Eleanor was in financial trouble, and that if I didn't let them protect the assets, you would squander it all. I gripped the edge of my desk. They had used me against her. They had weaponized her love for me to try and break her. I refused. Maggie continued. I turned my face to the wall and refused to sign. But 2 days later, I called the bank. The manager told me the power of attorney had been filed. He said he had my signature on file. I never signed it. Eleanor, they forged it. Then came the part that broke me. I know they will blame you, Maggie said. Looking straight into the camera, Vivian will say you twisted my arm, but you didn't. I am changing my will today, not because you asked, but because it is the last boundary I can set. Vivian has taken my peace. She has taken my sense of safety. I will not let her take the legacy I built for you. She wants control. I am giving her consequences. The last boundary I can set. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark, feeling the weight of Maggie's courage. She had been terrified, isolated, and sick. Yet she had fought back the only way she knew how. She had left me a shield. Now I had to pick it up. 2 days later, the deposition was scheduled. It was held in the conference room of Kessler and Rowe. The building was glass and steel, designed to intimidate. The table was long enough to land a plane on. I sat next to Sarah. Across from us sat Marcus Kessler, looking bored and expensive. And next to him sat Vivian. She was wearing a navy suit. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled at the skin of her temples. She didn't look at me when I entered. She stared at a spot on the wall behind my head, her eyes unblinking, like a doll's eyes. The court reporter set up her machine. The camera's red light blinked on. State your name for the record. Kessler said, Eleanor Watson. I said, Kessler began. He was good. He didn't start with the accusations. He started with the love. You loved your grandmother, didn't you? Ms. Watson? Yes. You wanted her to be happy? Yes. You wanted her to feel safe? Yes. And yet, Kessler said, leaning forward, you encouraged her to change her estate plan to cut out her only daughter. Did that make her feel safe? Or did it make her feel isolated? I didn't do that, I said. My voice was steady. I didn't encourage her to do anything. Come now, Kessler said, smiling thinly. You were there every day. You were whispering in her ear. You were telling her that her daughter didn't care about her. Isn't that true? I looked at Vivian. She was still staring at the wall. She looked frozen, suspended in a state of suspended animation. I wondered if she was medicated, or if this was just the dissociation of a woman who knew she was walking on a wire. No, I said, that is not true. Did you tell her you needed money? No. Did you tell her you had student loans? She knew I had loans. I didn't ask her to pay them, but you talked about money. Kessler pressed. You talked about how hard it was to survive in this economy. You preyed on her anxiety, didn't you? I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him about the video. I wanted to tell him that while I was cooking Maggie's soup, his client was forging signatures. But Sarah had warned me. Hold it inside. Don't give them the outburst they want. I held the grief in my throat like a stone. It made it hard to swallow, hard to breathe, but it kept my voice level. I never asked her for money. I said, I asked her for recipes. I asked her for advice. I asked her to tell me stories about my grandfather. That is what we talked about. Vivian blinked. Just once. It was a crack in the porcelain. Kessler shifted gears. Let us talk about the medical records. You claim she was competent, but you knew she was seeing a neurologist. She had age-related memory issues. I said, she did not have dementia. You are not a doctor. Ms. Watson. No, I said, but I am her granddaughter. I know the difference between forgetting where you put your keys and forgetting who you trust. Kessler paused. He looked at me, assessing. He realized I wasn't going to break. Vivian turned her head slowly. For the first time, she looked me in the eye. There was no warmth in her gaze. There was no motherly concern. There was just a flat, terrifying emptiness. It was the look of someone who had already decided that I was the enemy, and that enemies deserved no mercy. I looked back at her. I didn't look away. I thought of Maggie's video. Vivian, stop. I am stopping her. Gran, I thought, I am doing it. The deposition ended 3 hours later. I felt like I had run a marathon. Sarah walked me to the elevator. You did good, she said. You were perfect. Now, we turn the screws. What do we do? I asked. We file the motions. Sarah said, we don't mention the video yet. We let them think we are fishing. We demand a forensic handwriting analysis of the power of attorney document, and we subpoena the bank's internal access logs for the safe deposit box. Why not just show them the video? I asked. Because I want to see how they react. Sarah said, if they are innocent, they will agree to the analysis. If they are guilty, well, rats tend to scramble when you shine a light on the nest. We filed the motions the next morning. The reaction was immediate. Kessler called Sarah 2 hours later. He was shouting. He called the motions frivolous. He called them harassment. He said we were trying to turn a probate case into a circus. Sarah just listened, smiling. When he was done, she said, if the signature is genuine, Marcus, you have nothing to worry about. Surely Vivian wants to clear her name? He hung up. The next day, a courier arrived at Sarah's office with a large envelope. It was a settlement offer. Sarah called me in to review it. She laid the document on the desk. They are scared, she said. I looked at the numbers. It was staggering. Vivian was offering to split the estate 60-40. I would get 60%. $4 million. She would take 40. It was millions more than she was entitled to under the will, but it was also millions more than I would get if the previous will was reinstated. It was a bribe. But then I read the next page. Clause 14. Confidentiality and non-disparagement. The parties agree that the terms of this settlement and all facts and allegations related to the underlying dispute shall remain strictly confidential. The parties agree to destroy all copies of any and all documents, recordings, or other materials obtained during discovery. The parties agree never to speak of this matter to any third party, including law enforcement. I looked up at Sarah. They want to buy my silence. I said, they want to bury the evidence. Sarah corrected, they want you to destroy the video. They suspect you found something. Eleanor, they don't know what, but the specificity of our motions spooked them. They know the handwriting analysis will fail. They are trying to pay you to look the other way. I felt a surge of disgust. $4 million to let them get away with it. $4 million to let Grant Sorrell keep preying on old women. $4 million to let Vivian pretend she was a grieving daughter instead of a thief. It is a lot of money, Sarah said quietly. I have to advise you that trials are risky. Juries are unpredictable. This is a guaranteed win, financially speaking. I looked at the paper. I imagined signing it. I imagined taking the money and buying a house on the coast. I imagined living the rest of my life knowing that I had sold Maggie's truth for a payout. No, I said. Are you sure? Sarah asked. I am sure. I am not signing an NDA. I am not destroying the video. Sarah smiled. I was hoping you would say that. We rejected the offer. The rejection hit Vivian like a physical blow. I could feel the reverberations from across town. I started doing my own digging. If Vivian was offering $4 million, she wasn't just scared of prison. She was desperate to keep control of something. I went to the county recorder's website. I searched for property records under Vivian's name. She owned a beautiful colonial in the Heights, a house she had lived in for 20 years. It was paid off. I pulled the deed history. There was a new recording. Dated 3 weeks ago. Mortgage. Lender. Apex. Private lending. It wasn't a bank mortgage. It was a hard money loan. High interest. Short term. The amount was $500,000. Why would she mortgage her paid-off house for $500,000 in the middle of a lawsuit she expected to win? I looked at the date again. It was 2 days after I had confronted Grant Sorrell. She was moving money. She was liquidity harvesting. Was she paying Grant? Was she paying Kessler? Or was she preparing to run? I called Sarah. She mortgaged her house. I said, Sarah was silent for a moment. That is irrational behavior, she said. Unless she knows she is going to lose, or unless she is in debt to someone who doesn't take us. Grant, I said. It has to be, Sarah said. He has her. He probably told her that if she loses, he goes down too. So she better fund the defense or pay him off. The walls were closing in on her. I felt a strange pang of pity. Mixed with the anger, she had aligned herself with a wolf to catch a rabbit, and now the wolf was eating her. The pre-trial conference was set for a rainy Tuesday in November. The courthouse was buzzing. The gossip blog had run another story. Battle for the Hale fortune. Daughter versus granddaughter in final showdown. The hallway outside Judge Ramirez's chambers was packed. There were curious locals. People I recognized from the grocery store who suddenly found probate law fascinating. And there was the blogger, a woman with dyed red hair who was typing furiously on her phone as I walked by. I kept my head down. Sarah walked beside me. A shield and a blazer, inside the chambers. Judge Ramirez looked tired. Counsel, he said, looking over his glasses. I have reviewed the motions, the witness lists, the allegations. He looked at Vivian, then at me. This is a family tragedy, he said. I have seen thousands of these. Nobody wins. Even when they win, I am warning you both. Do not turn my courtroom into a soap opera. Stick to the law. If I see theatrics, I will clear the gallery. He looked at Kessler. The motion for handwriting analysis is granted. Vivian flinched. And the motion for the bank records is granted. The judge continued. Kessler tried to object. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. It is discovery. Mr. Kessler, the judge snapped. If the signature is valid, you have nothing to hide. We walked out of the chambers. Vivian looked pale. She looked like she was going to be sick. As we passed her in the hallway, she reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Eleanor, she hissed. I stopped. Sarah stepped between us, but I waved her back. What? I asked. You are ruining everything, Vivian whispered. Her eyes were wide, frantic. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I said, I am listening to Maggie. You are listening to a ghost, Vivian snapped. She looked around, checking if the blogger was watching. You are going to expose things that can't be fixed. Grant is not someone you want to corner. Eleanor, is that a warning? I asked. Or are you asking for help? Vivian's face crumbled for a split second. The mask slipped completely. I saw the terror underneath. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was pure, unadulterated fear. Just take the money, she pleaded. Please, just take it and go. I pulled my arm away. I cannot do that. Mom. She watched me walk away. I felt her gaze burning into my back. Desperate and terrified. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off. The trial was scheduled to start in 2 days. I had the video. I had the power to end this. But the moral weight was crushing me. If I played that video, Vivian would be charged. She would be humiliated publicly. She would likely lose her home. She might go to jail. She was my mother. She was the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes. She was the woman who had held my hand when I got my wisdom teeth out. She was also the woman who had gaslit her own mother, forged documents, and tried to destroy my reputation. I wrestled with it. Was it revenge? No. Revenge would be hurting her because she hurt me. This was justice. This was accountability. But accountability felt an awful lot like cruelty when it was wearing your mother's face. I thought about not playing it. I thought about just using the threat of it to force a settlement without the confidentiality clause. But Grant Sorrell would walk free. He would find another Maggie, and Vivian would never truly admit what she did. She would spin a narrative that she let me win because she was generous. The lie would survive. Maggie wanted the truth. Where I kept my truth. I couldn't erase her truth just to save Vivian's comfort. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a voicemail. I picked it up. The notification said Mom. I hadn't blocked her. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I pressed play. The voice that came through the speaker was not the voice of the woman in the courtroom. It was small, cracked, broken. Eleanor. She breathed. There was a pause, filled with the sound of jagged breathing. I know. I know you found it. I saw the camera bag. I know. She sniffed. Please, she whispered. Please, don't play it. I will give you anything. I will walk away. Just don't play it. You don't know what will happen. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence, the phone cold in my hand. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard my mother beg. She wasn't just afraid of the court. She was afraid of what will happen. You don't know what will happen. Was she talking about prison? Or was she talking about Grant? The terror in her voice was contagious. It seeped into my bones. I realized then that the trial wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a detonation, and I was the one holding the match. I looked at the flash drive sitting on the table. I am sorry. Mom, I whispered to the empty room. But I wasn't stopping. I couldn't stop. The train was already off the tracks, and we were all just waiting for the crash. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old anxiety. It was a smell I had grown accustomed to over the last few weeks. But today, on the morning of the final hearing, it felt suffocating. The gallery was full. The local blogger was there, tapping away on her phone in the second row. There were neighbors I recognized. People who had known Maggie for 30 years and were treating her legacy like a spectator sport. I sat at the plaintiff's table, technically the respondent's table, next to Sarah Barton. My hands were folded in my lap, gripping each other so tightly my knuckles were white. Judge Ramirez entered. The bailiff called the room to order. The air conditioner hummed, a low drone that did nothing to cut the tension. Vivian was the first witness. She walked to the stand with the grace of a martyr. She was wearing a soft blue suit today, something that made her look maternal and non-threatening. She took the oath, her voice wavering just the right amount. Marcus Kessler began his examination. He treated her like a porcelain doll that had already been cracked. Mrs. Hale Watson, he said softly, can you tell the court about your relationship with your mother? Vivian looked at the judge, then at the gallery. She did not look at me. We were best friends, Vivian said. Her voice was thick with emotion. We spoke every day. I took care of her finances. I took care of her home. She relied on me for everything. And when did that change? Kessler asked. Vivian pulled a tissue from her sleeve and dabbed at her dry eyes. When Eleanor came back, she said, "When my mother started getting confused. Describe that confusion for us." She would forget things. Vivian said, "She would forget conversations we had just had. She would get paranoid. She started thinking people were stealing from her, and she was lonely. So terribly lonely." Eleanor saw that loneliness, and she filled it. Kessler nodded gravely. "You believe your daughter took advantage of that loneliness?" Vivian finally looked at me. Her expression was tragic, a masterpiece of sorrow. "I do not want to believe it," she said. "No mother wants to believe her child is capable of that." But Eleanor got too close, too fast. She isolated Maggie. She made Maggie believe I was the enemy. It was calculating. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, but I kept my face stone still. Calculating. That was the word she used to describe me cooking dinner. That was the word for me holding Maggie's hand while she cried. Sarah Barton stood up for cross-examination. She did not look sympathetic. She looked like a surgeon picking up a scalpel. "Mrs. Hale Watson," Sarah began, "you stated that you handled your mother's finances because she was confused. Is that correct?" "Yes," Vivian said. "And yet, on December 12th, the day the will was signed, you were not present at the house, correct? I was not allowed to be there." Vivian said bitterly, "Eleanor had locked me out." Sarah picked up a piece of paper. "This is the security log from your mother's building." Sarah said, "It shows that on the evening of December 10th, 2 days before the signing, you visited the apartment." Vivian hesitated. "Yes, I went to check on her." "You went to check on her," Sarah repeated. "And who was with you?" "No one," Vivian said. "I went alone." Sarah held up the log. The doorman recorded a guest. Sarah said, "A male, entering with you at 8:30 in the evening." Vivian stiffened. The doorman is mistaken. Or perhaps it was a delivery. Sarah did not let up. A delivery that stayed for 2 hours? Vivian's eyes darted to Kessler. "I do not recall every detail of every visit. I was grieving my mother's decline." "Let us talk about that decline," Sarah said. "You claim she was confused. You claim she was paranoid about theft." "Yes." Sarah walked back to the table and picked up a thick folder, the one we had reconstructed. "Is it paranoia, Mrs. Hale Watson, if someone actually is stealing from you?" "Objection." Kessler shot up, argumentative. "Sustained," Judge Ramirez said. Though he leaned forward, watching Vivian closely, Sarah rephrased, "Mrs. Hale Watson, do you recognize the name Sentinel Global Consulting?" The room went very quiet. The blogger in the second row stopped typing. Vivian's face went pale. Not the soft, sympathetic pale she had cultivated, but a sickly gray color. "I believe it was a firm mother used," Vivian said, "for tax planning." "Did your mother hire them?" Sarah asked. "Or did you?" "I helped her," Vivian said. Her voice was getting sharper. Losing the mournful tremor, she needed asset protection. "And where are the assets they protected?" Sarah asked. "Because according to the bank records, $50,000 was transferred to that LLC in 4 months, and the LLC lists its address as a mailbox rental next to a dry cleaner." Vivian gripped the railing of the witness stand. "I was following professional advice," she snapped. "If the investments failed, that is a market issue, not fraud." Sarah paused. She let the silence stretch. "And on October 14th, Sarah said quietly, the night your mother was hospitalized, you attempted to use a power of attorney to access her safe deposit box. I needed her medical directives," Vivian cried. "They were in the box." The medical directives were on file at the hospital. Sarah said, "We checked. The only thing in that box, Mrs. Hale Watson, was a bank statement with a question mark written on it." Vivian was breathing hard now. She looked at me, and the mask slipped completely. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "You are twisting everything. You are trying to make me look like a criminal because you cannot accept that you manipulated an old woman. I did not manipulate anyone. I just listened to her." Sarah sat down. No further questions. When it was my turn to take the stand. My legs felt heavy. I walked up the 3 steps and sat in the chair that was still warm from Vivian. I swore to tell the truth. Sarah kept it simple. Eleanor. She said, "Why did you spend so much time with Maggie in her final months?" "Because she was my best friend," I said, "and because she was scared." "Scared of what?" "She was scared of losing control." I said, "She felt like decisions were being made for her. She wanted someone who would listen to her, not talk over her." "Did you ever ask her to change her will?" "Never." I said, "I didn't even know she had money. I thought she lived on a pension." "Did you ever prevent Vivian from seeing her?" "No." I said, "Maggie asked me not to let Vivian in sometimes. She said she didn't have the energy for the argument." Kessler rose for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at me with disdain. "Ms. Watson," he said, "you say she was scared. You say she wanted to be heard. If she was so lucid, if she was so clear about her wishes, why didn't she tell her family?" I looked at him. I didn't understand. "Why keep it a secret?" Kessler pressed. "If Maggie truly wanted you to have the estate, why didn't she call a family meeting? Why did she hide behind a lawyer? Why did she let you find out in a room full of strangers? Because she was afraid of you." I wanted to say, "Because," Kessler continued, his voice rising, "secrecy is a hallmark of undue influence. You isolated her. You created a secret world where you were the savior and her daughter was the villain, and you convinced her to sign a document she didn't understand just to keep you around. Isn't that the truth?" "No," I said. My voice shook slightly. "She kept it a secret because she knew that if she told Vivian, Vivian wouldn't stop until she changed it back." Kessler smiled. "So you admit you knew there would be conflict? You admit you knew this would destroy the family, and you went along with it anyway?" "I didn't go along with anything." I said, "I just loved her. You loved her $6 million worth." Kessler said, "Objection," Sarah shouted. "Withdrawn." Kessler said, he sat down, looking satisfied. He had planted the seed. He had made the secrecy look sinister. He had made Maggie's fear look like my manipulation. Sarah stood up again. "Your Honor?" she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried to the back of the room. "We have one final piece of evidence." Kessler frowned. "We have not received any new exhibits. This was discovered recently." Sarah said, "It is rebutting the claim of undue influence. It goes directly to the decedent's state of mind." She pulled the flash drive out of her pocket. It was the red one, the one from the tin. Judge Ramirez looked at it. "Proceed," he said. Sarah walked to the AV cart. She plugged the drive into the court system. A large screen descended from the ceiling behind the witness stand. The room was dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Sarah clicked the file. Maggie's face appeared on the screen. It was huge, looming over the courtroom. The high-definition video captured every line on her face, every gray hair, every ounce of exhaustion and determination. The audio crackled, then cleared. Maggie's voice filled the room. "If you are watching this, they have started." I heard a gasp from the gallery. Vivian froze. She was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. "I am making this recording because I do not trust my own memory anymore," Maggie said, "not because it is failing, but because they are trying to convince me it is." The video played on. Maggie described the hospital. She described the pressure. She described Grant Sorrell. He stood at the foot of the bed and smiled like a shark. Maggie said, "I looked at Vivian. She was gripping the table with both hands. Her knuckles were yellow. She looked like she was vibrating." I refused. Maggie's voice continued. "I turned my face to the wall. But 2 days later, I found out the papers were filed anyway. They forged my signature." "Eleanor," Kessler stood up. "Your Honor." "I object. This is hearsay. We cannot authenticate this." "Sit down. Mr. Kessler," Judge Ramirez barked. He was staring at the screen. Transfixed. "I am changing my will today," Maggie said. "Not because Eleanor asked, but because it is the last boundary I can set. Vivian has taken my peace. She has taken my sense of safety. I will not let her take the legacy I built. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Maggie leaned into the camera. Her eyes, magnified on the screen, seemed to look directly at the plaintiff's table. "Vivian," Maggie said. Her voice dropped, becoming steel. "If you are hearing this, stop. Stop hurting us, and stop lying. You know what you did, and now, I have made sure everyone else knows too." The reaction was visceral. Vivian made a sound. It was a sharp intake of breath, like someone had kicked her in the ribs. She recoiled physically from the screen, pressing her back against the chair. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at the giant image of her mother. The mother she claimed was confused. The mother she claimed she was protecting. And she crumbled. It wasn't a sorrowful crumble. It was a structural failure. She leaned over to Kessler. I saw her lips move. She was whispering frantically. Her hands were shaking so badly she knocked over a pitcher of water. It crashed to the floor, ice cubes skittering across the wood. But no one looked at it. Everyone was looking at Vivian. She stood up. Her legs seemed unable to hold her weight. She grabbed Kessler's arm to steady herself. "Your Honor," Kessler said. His voice was not smooth anymore. It was tight. My client needs a recess. Immediately." Judge Ramirez looked at Vivian. He looked at the shattered pitcher on the floor. He looked at the frozen face of Maggie Hale on the screen. "The video proves quite a bit." "Counsel," the judge said dryly. "Medical emergency," Vivian gasped out. She looked like she was going to faint, or vomit. "We are recessing for 20 minutes, the judge said, banging his gavel. Vivian didn't walk out. She fled. She practically ran toward the side door, Kessler trailing behind her, looking for the first time like he had lost control of the narrative. But before she went through the door, she stopped. She turned and looked at me. I was still sitting in the witness box. I hadn't moved. Her eyes locked on mine. I expected hatred. I expected the rage she had promised me in the coffee shop. But it wasn't hatred. It was terror. And underneath the terror, something else. Calculation. She was doing the math. She was calculating the cost of the mortgage, the cost of the lawsuit, the cost of prison. And mixed in with the math was a deep, burning shame. She looked at me and saw the daughter she had tried to destroy. And she saw the mother she had betrayed. And for a second, she looked small. Then the door swung shut behind her. Sarah Barton let out a long exhale. "Well," she said, "I think we just nuked the site from orbit." We walked out into the hallway. The gallery had erupted into whispers. The blogger was typing so fast her thumbs were a blur. We stood near the water fountain. I felt lightheaded. The adrenaline was crashing. 10 minutes later, the side door opened. Marcus Kessler walked out. He was alone. He adjusted his tie. He walked over to us. He didn't look at me. He looked at Sarah. "Can we talk?" he asked. Sarah crossed her arms. "I am listening. My client is unwell." Kessler said, "The stress of the trial, the emotional impact of seeing her mother. It has been too much. Cut the crap." "Marcus," Sarah said, "you saw the video. You know we are going to send a copy to the district attorney." Kessler winced. He lowered his voice. "Look," he said, "Vivian is willing to withdraw the contest, with prejudice. She drops the suit. She drops the claims against Eleanor. The will stands. The estate is yours. 100%. I looked at him. That is what we wanted. That was the victory." "But?" Sarah asked. "But," Kessler said, glancing around the hallway, "we need a global settlement. The video stays sealed. It does not enter the public record. It does not go to the DA. The discrepancies with the power of attorney and the LLC. We agree those were misunderstandings. Vivian walks away with her reputation intact. Eleanor walks away with $6 million. He looked at me then. "It is a good deal. Ms. Watson," he said, "you get your life back. You get the money. And you don't have to be the daughter who sent her mother to prison." I stared at him. It was the same choice I had faced before. But the stakes were higher now. Before, it was about money. Now, it was about mercy. I looked at the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. Behind them lay the truth, laid bare on a projector screen. If I agreed, I would be rich. I would be safe. Vivian would go back to her house in the Heights, and she would probably sell it to pay off Grant Sorrell. And she would live the rest of her life knowing I held the gun that could kill her social standing. But she would be free, and Grant Sorrell would be free. I thought about the note in the cookbook. Look where I kept my truth. Maggie hadn't kept her truth in a bank vault or a safety deposit box. She had kept it in a tin, hidden behind a painting of the ocean. She had kept it for me. She had said, "Play when they lie." They were still lying. Even now, in the surrender. They were lying. They were calling felonies misunderstandings. But then I thought of Vivian's face in the doorway. The shame. I looked at Sarah. She was waiting for me to decide. She had done her job. She had won the war. Now I had to decide what to do with the prisoners. I stepped forward, closing the distance between me and Kessler. "I want the estate." I said, "Done." Kessler said quickly, "And I want Vivian to pay back every cent she transferred to Sentinel Global." I said, Kessler nodded, "We can arrange that." And, I said, my voice steady, "I want Grant Sorrell." Kessler blinked. "What?" "I will agree to seal the video regarding Vivian." I said, "I won't send it to the DA. I won't press charges against my mother. But Grant Sorrell is not part of this family. I want his name in the record. I want the evidence of his transfers public. I want him exposed." Kessler looked uncomfortable. "That might be difficult. He is a third party." "Then no deal." I said, "And we go back inside, and I play the video for the press." Kessler looked at me. He saw the same thing Vivian had seen. He saw that I wasn't the scared granddaughter anymore. I was the one holding the keys. He sighed. He looked tired. "I will talk to her," he said. He turned and walked back toward the conference room. I leaned against the wall. The hallway was loud, filled with the murmur of a town that loved a tragedy. I closed my eyes. I had won. I had the money. I had the house. But as I stood there, waiting for the lawyer to return, I realized that the inheritance wasn't the $6 million. The inheritance was the spine Maggie had given me. It was the ability to stand in a hallway, shaking but standing, and decide what justice looked like. It looked like mercy for the family, and a sword for the wolves. And as I waited for the door to open, I knew that no matter what happened next, Maggie was finally resting in peace. Thank you for listening to My Mom Sued Me for Grandma's $6.8 million will. A secret video made her drop everything. I hope this story of betrayal, justice, and the complex weight of family secrets resonated with you. It is a reminder that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money, but the truth. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Do you think Eleanor made the right choice in the hallway? Should she have sent Vivian to prison? Or was mercy the right path? Have you ever had to fight for a family member's legacy? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Until next time, keep your secrets safe.